I'm so excited to be here today. I know I always start saying that. Um, oh, that's interesting. Why is live streaming not available? Huh. Hang on a second. I'm trying to go live across all these platforms and let's try again. We're going to be talking about empathy and narcissism. So today we're going to be talking about empathy and narcissism. I know that it's pretty well known that narcissists struggle to be empathic. Hey, Kim, so good to see you today. That's one of the big handicaps that narcissists have is effective empathy. There is different types of empathy. There's cognitive and there's affective empathy. So cognitive is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So it's like someone tells you something that's happening at work and you can imagine how challenging that would be, that it would be tough. You can picture yourself in that role. That's cognitive empathy. You may not feel a whole lot about it. It's just a connection, as an awareness of what it would be like without really feeling an emotional sense of the experience. Affective empathy is something that narcissists and people, a lot of people with personality disorders struggle with, and that's the ability to be able to feel what it would feel like to be in that position. You know, when you're watching a Hallmark cards, let me say that again. When you let's use the Super Bowl this weekend. Although I didn't watch it, but I did see one. It was about put out by the international or maybe the American Jewish Society, and they talked about how the hate that there is at least 1 out of 5 people in the Jewish community experience hate this last year. When I watched that picture of that garage with the mom walking out to the car with her little daughter and then seeing that horrible thing on the garage and then the neighbor watching, I felt sad. I was near tears watching it. That's an example of affective empathy. I was I didn't really have a sense of what it feel like to be in that position because it hasn't happened to me, although I could imagine how awkward it would be and how much shame I'd feel. So that would be cognitive empathy, but I felt this resonating, this emotional connection with this person, and that is an example of affective empathy. And that's something that narcissists and other highly conflictual people struggle with. They don't have a sense of what it would be like to be you. And you know that because they do these horrific things like betray you. They joke about you behind your back, or maybe they steal from you. They drive recklessly and see your terror in the seat beside them, and you don't see the sense of a caring about how it affects you. Those are examples that this is a lack of affective empathy. In fact, sometimes they even get pleasure out of it. They derive a sense of a reward. It's almost like a dopamine hit they get for upsetting you and distressing you. So again, that's a lack of affective empathy. But I heard something that was super fascinating that I really want to talk about today with you. What happens to victims? What goes wrong around empathy for victims? And I often think that I'm just speculating now. This is just me going off the cuff, making some conclusions as I think through all my years of practice and experience as a clinician. But I sometimes think that we call ourselves empaths when really we're describing something that's actually not a good thing, even a harmful thing to ourselves. It certainly is a loss of um, it's a loss of our sense of self when this happens. And I really want to get into that deeper. So thank you so much for joining me. I know, for example, Wiz, thank you so much for your great comment to me. I appreciate it. I'm glad you like my content and you find my advice really helpful. I'm so glad you guys are hanging out with me today. I'm right now live on TikTok, Facebook, and not Instagram, YouTube. Live on YouTube, Instagram. Why am I saying Instagram? Live on YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok right now. So, Aaron, I can't really tell you whether or not you should go get a massage during lunch break because I'm not for sure really what your question is about. And I don't know what an NURU is, so I don't know what that is. Vera, we're talking about when empathy goes wrong for survivors who have been in narcissistically abusive relationships. And hey, guys, thank you so much for liking this. For a longest time, I didn't know how to like a live that you just tap the screen. So please tap the screen. That really helps get it out. And Aaron, I have a feeling this is a setup for a not so good comment. So please, I prefer you not continuing with this line of discussion or you will be muted. Kim, if you're there, would you watch Aaron's comment so that it doesn't get abusive? Because I have a feeling we're on an edge. Yeah, well, Aaron, it just I'm not comfortable with the question. So I think that I'm not the right person. Somatic therapy does help. So if you're looking for like, certain types of yoga, there are types of somatic therapy that's very helpful, but I'm not able to comment on whether or not this is beneficial or for you or not. Yeah, so let's talk about, I just kind of explained for those who are joining me right now what the difference between cognitive and affective empathy, but I want to get into something that I just heard about that makes it super interesting, and I think it goes wrong for survivors, the different types of empathy that where we lose ourself for the sake of the other person. So that's what I want to get into today. So these are big words, I know, and they're kind of strange, so I'm going to unpack them first. The first type of empathy that's normal that we have with each other is called imaginative other perspective. Imaginative other perspective. What that means, it's a fancy way of saying, is that I'm myself and you are you, and I can put myself in your position. I can imagine, I can have an imagination, use my imagination to understand what you're going through, and I can take your perspective as I'm listening to you. That's a normal experience of cognitive empathy, which I just described, a very normal type. But there's another type that's called imaginative self-perspective. And I have a feeling this is what happens to a lot of survivors, that we don't just have to imagine what it would be like to be our partner or our loved one or our family member who's narcissistic. They actually want us to take their position. They want us to become to interfere and assume that we can manage their life. And you know that you're doing it when you're anticipating their emotional reaction. I remember back in the day when my dad would walk in from outside the field, we would listen to how he would open the door. We would listen to whether or not he would call out and say, "Hey, I'm here." And depending on the way that he entered the house, we could tell whether he was angry, he was depressed, or he was in a really great space. And then based on that, we would then rush to anticipate. We'd actually jump off the couch because it wasn't okay to do nothing, because his opinion was if he's working, everybody should be working. So there'd be the scurrying around to look busy. You might hear my mom throwing the coffee pot, because that's back in the day before the coffee, we had coffee makers, the percolator on the stove, starting to get the hot water ready to have a cup of hot coffee for him, because he really loved his coffee. But you could feel the tension in the house as we put ourselves into his position and began to move to fix his emotional space. That's a good example of imaginative self-perspective. It's when when the toxic person or the immature, psychologically pathological person wants you to not only identify what they're going through, but to anticipate and fix. They want you to rescue them from their experience. And so they look to us as tools, like literally like you're part of their interior world. And it's your job to sort of like have an emotional corrective experience so they feel better. And that's why you already know with certain questions you can't ask, certain things you should say, certain things you should do or not do. My dad was a person where when he was really upset, you were supposed to be quiet, stay out of his way, and don't bother him. He just instinctively knew that. In fact, you could almost see, like me, I tended to be more parentified. I would like move in and maybe offer to rub his shoulders or ask if there's something else I could do for him. But you can feel the whole orbit. Exactly. One of you said it's like we go into orbit. You can feel the whole area of us moving around him, trying to move him into a better space so that we knew that we all were safer, because he was starting to de-escalate and start to feel better. It's really painful when this happens, because there's a lot that's going on that then has to happen for you. When you're asked to do this, you cannot take care of yourself. You have to, would you please, by the way, mute Lupe? I just really do not need this today. And Melissa McCarthy is an amazing person. And if I was anywhere remotely like her, even making the kind of money she's making or have the kind of influence that she had, I would be so, so happy. I don't know why people think it's an insult to name an overweight actress and then turn around and then attribute that to everybody in the world who's overweight. If you don't like the way I look, please just move on, please. So anyway, you got to rise out of me. I'm sure that's what you wanted. So yeah, I'm glad for you. Glad that you're able to do that. Isn't it amazing how we have to like move in the orbit of these individuals when this happens? We have to like, what you're asked to do is you're asked to submerge yourself so that you're not allowed to exist. You can't anticipate, you can't be in touch with your own feelings. You know, what I would be feeling if I was able to put myself back in that position, I would be feeling nervous. I mean, my dad kind of scared me. I was feeling tense about what was happening in the farming. So I was unhappy the fact that maybe it wasn't raining a whole lot, or that I knew he was behind. And I knew it was stressing because he needed to be plowing and getting all the corn in, and it wasn't being done. I also knew that I had awareness of the financial impact this meant for the farm as us as a family. So that was making me nervous. Is like, how would that affect me for school and school clothes and the ability for me to be able to like take care of myself? You know, all of this stuff makes it really, really stressful. So, but when you're doing this imaginative self perspective, which is this dysfunctional form of empathy, you're not able to attend to yourself. And the other thing is that you're not able to even engage in a realistic way with this person. You're not like able to go back and forth and talk to them about you and where you're at and how's it going with you. You literally in this moment cease to exist, and you're using yourself, you're using yourself to their benefit as a tool. That's what you've become. You've become part of their adaptive coping mechanism. So you have to hold yourself in abeyance, you cease existing, and then you allow yourself to be utilized by this person who lacks that functioning. So in the benefit of the good of the whole. Exactly. You fade into the wallpaper. That's really well put. Exactly. So you fade into the wallpaper as you benefit this other person who's not functioning so well. And think about how costly that is, especially when it's not good between partners, not at all, because it should be equitable and reciprocal. There should be a give and take, a flow back and forth, which is not happening. So now there's an imbalance happening when there's between two adults. And then the other challenge is when you're talking about a child, a child then can't focus on their own developmental issues. They can't focus on what they're psychologically needing. And the other thing is it does a reversal of roles. Think about that for a moment. In that moment, a child then becomes the parent who's comforting the parent, and the parent is getting the support from the child. So it's a severe role reversal, which then leaves the child without any parental support because they're showing up for that parent. It's just harmful on a lot of levels. It's interesting that I have a feeling that when people say I'm an empath, they're really signaling that they've had to do this a lot. And they've gotten very good at it, that they're actually in a hypervigilant state. So when they walk into any setting, they're already like scanning the environment in this high alert position, in almost a fight or flight, like anticipatory fight or flight, wondering who's not doing well in the room, who's the most important person here, and how well are they doing, and what can we do to make this work better, so that you really can't, in a way, your sense of self doesn't get expressed in that moment because you're focusing so much on those in your room. Yeah, Maria, it's me too. It's me too. And the other problem is when this is interesting because I'm finishing this book and I highly recommend it. If you guys want a very good book that's helpful on this topic, I highly recommend Dr. Lindsay Gibson's book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. And I know people reacted to the title like, I don't like that title. That's excusing them. Well, she's just trying to describe it psychologically. She's saying parents aren't well formed, that they have immature coping styles. She's not saying that she's not minimizing it. She's not saying, oh, it's not that bad of a problem. I kind of heard some of your reaction when I've talked about this book before, and you felt like it was insulting. Please hear me. This book is filled with practical experiences, practical exercises. It really explains it well. And one of the things that Dr. Gibson, and I got to hear her speak, I actually took a continuing education class from her. It was rich. In fact, I'm hoping to interview her. I'd like to reach out and get her on my podcast because I think that would be fabulous. But one of the things she described that happens for children when they live in this environment on a continuous basis, their sense of self, like think about it. For those of you who grew up in this is your, I just described your family. I know I've described my family, but I described your family. Did you feel like you got to be your real self? Do you even know what your real self is? She talks a lot about how we develop a role self. We occupy a role. You're a good child. You're a good girl. You're a good boy. She doesn't talk about you didn't get to explore you. You know, you didn't get to be, I didn't get to be Kerry. You didn't get to be Maria. You didn't get to be Kathy. You had to show up as, you know, you either were scapegoated or you were the golden child or you were a role. You occupied a certain role. And what happens, she even has a picture of it, is because of this, maybe it's also Dr. Ramani talks about this because I'm getting it from both angles. When this happens, your core self doesn't get to develop. It kind of remains empty because you really start to show up. You show up for the benefit of the family. So you put all this effort into developing this role, this good person, or the rebel, or the acting out one, or the depressed, or the misfit. I think of, for example, the old one of the Breakfast Club. That's a great example of, you know, each of those students came in and they had a role. The teacher saw them in a certain position, you know, the jock and the misfit and the cheerleader. They were able to form the role, but them themselves didn't get to really flesh out who they are as a person. And that's what happens for us too. So we think about this these circles within a circle. I can't say that other word. Circle within a circle. The core circle is you, and you're not getting to define that. So it's kind of empty and not really well fleshed out. And then the circle around that is this role that you've learned really well. For me, it was the great student who always did everything right and made all the right decisions and was just a role model who was so helpful to other people. And the teacher's pet, that was another one of my roles, the teacher pet. So that role got really formed well, but the inner part of me, the part of me that maybe I felt when I was alone or on the bus by myself, or maybe when I was working at my chores because I grew up on a dairy farm, that self I only experienced with myself. I didn't really get to experience it in the world. And I think that's what a lot of us happens, is that we don't get to flesh out who we really are. We just flesh out who people want us to be. And that's the role self. So this imaginative self-perspective taking that happens to survive dysfunctional families and happens to survive dysfunctional relationships really causes us to not become a fully formed person. Even now, when I think back to my second marriage, and for those of you who know who my story is, I was married a very long time to a man who died of cancer. So Brad died in 2015 from a rare form of cancer, and I was widowed. And then I went out and I met this person, and I thought it was a fabulous person. I didn't realize I met a facade. I didn't realize it was being love bombed. I didn't even know what love bombing was. And I got into the second marriage, and once I got in and the mask came off, I quickly felt he threw me into the role. And the role he wanted me to play was the dutiful wife who didn't ask him for too much, who should have stayed out of his way and let him act out as much as he wanted, but felt sorry for him and pitied him and never confronted him for all his bad decisions and bad actions. That's sort of if I had to cast a movie part, that's the role he wanted me to play. And whenever I would show up as myself, like if I showed up hurt or angry or depressed, then it would like blow up. Things would get worse because he didn't want to deal with me. He just wanted me to stay in my role. So that's probably what lots of you are feeling in these relationships, is that you can't show up yourself. You can't, like many of you talked about riding in a car with a narcissist, how scary it is. You can't act scared because they'll punish you for it. Or how many times they betrayed you, and you can't really react. If you react and they accuse you of abusing them, or if you don't react, then you feel like you're betraying yourself because you're not standing up for yourself. All of this weird dynamics happens around it because you're not allowed to be authentically you. And if it happens long enough, over enough time, it becomes so ingrained in us that we really struggle to connect with ourselves, which just goes back to this idea that I'm proposing today. It's just a theory of mine that I wonder those of us who identify ourselves as empaths really what we're saying is, hey, I've gotten so good at showing up for the needs of other people that I don't even really know what I want and feel in any moment, because I'm really all about making sure the room that I walk into is in the best emotional space possible, that I've learned to do that for everyone around us. It is, yeah, it's painful, because the bottom line is, here's the thing, and I recently went out with a friend a couple weeks ago, and her and I had a great time. And the second day, we indulged in something, and got a little high. And I felt really vulnerable because I got very emotional. She shared a song with me that just drove me. I got to sobbing, and then I found myself apologizing for sobbing and having this big emotional reaction, because I have been so ingrained in me that my emotional experience of anger and sadness and even joy is too much, and I need to keep myself to this straight little narrow path. And if I veer off this path, then I'm going to end up upsetting somebody. They're not going to like me, and then I'm going to be in trouble. So it's really wild how it doesn't allow us to be ourselves, to know that we can be, emotional, and that you can be things can upset you. So I would love, if I could like wish something for all of us, I wish we could just have a freedom just to be ourselves, to let it hang out, just to chill and know that no matter what happens and no matter what you express, that you're safe, that you're lovely, you're beautiful just as you are. I really would love that for all of us. Yeah, RDW, they love that, to keep us walking on eggshells, because they want us to function for them. And a couple does a couple things. One is because they don't have that inside of them. Imagine if you're missing a limb, for example, and somebody was offered to be that limb for you, why would you not take them up on that? Of course, in fact, maybe you're an abusive person would say, you have to operate like that limb. I require you to act like the missing limb. That's your job. That's what they say to us. And then on top of it, the other thing is, by them doing that, then they get to say whatever goes wrong, it's not their fault because they're missing this appendage, you're missing this whatever it is. So it gives them a convenience excuse to blame something else outside of themselves for their bad decisions or bad behaviors. It's a perfect setup. I mean, for them, it's a win-win. They get you help out, you rescue, you do all the saving. And then they have no accountability for all their bad actions. It's just, who would not want that, right? I mean, jeez, I've never had that in my life. I think that's the other thing. I'm now, again, off the top of my head talking. I can't imagine what it would be like to have the convenience of having people do this for me. Really, when you think about what others do for the sake of narcissistic people, the things they get away with, the way in which we all let them off, the way that they're able to avoid justice and accountability, even in criminal offenses and civil offenses, is freaking amazing to me. I just find that so shocking, so utterly shocking that people are able to just bystep that. And you know why? It's because they exhaust us so much that we just give up. We step away because we can't bear the fight, because they will fight to the nth degree. We can't bear it. So we just finally, everybody throws their hands up and says, just get rid of them. Just get rid of them. So yeah, I've talked now for about 25 minutes or so. Let's take your questions. I know a lot of you have questions that range the whole gamut. I know right now on TikTok, the court, I put up something about court and what goes wrong with family court. I know some of you have questions about that. Thank you for those of you who've been reaching out to me about it. I wish I could solve more of your situations. I know a lot of you are in terrible situations, but let's talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about that's related to mental health, related to narcissistic abuse, related to dysfunctional relationships, maybe even related to narcissism itself. For those of you who don't know, I know I haven't stopped to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I'm a former clinical psychologist. I retired in 2015 when my husband passed away. So these days I don't do one-on-one counseling, but I love to stay current. I'm in constant continuing education, learning more and more about narcissism, personality disorders, and all of that. But so I love talking about this and be happy to talk to you about your issues. So JCC3 wants to know, how do you deal with a sister who pretends to get better and then acts more narcissistic again? Yeah, really what that's about, JCC, is that she just really wants you off her back. So whenever they tell you they're getting better, it's really just to say, I want you to quit complaining. It's really not an authentic, I'm getting better, because to get better requires you to have a dark night of your own soul, for you to move into crisis and say, I can't live like this. I can't face myself. This is too upsetting. It's not who I want to be. I'm having a ethical dilemma with myself. I'm going to change. It's when you get to your sense of your own bottom, and then you say, I have to become a different person. So when people aren't in personal crisis and they just say, I'm doing better, what they're saying is, I want you off my back. And I find it intriguing, and I did this too. I want you to know I did this. If you read the book Love You More, which is my story, Love You More is my story. It's a memoir told like a novel. I've written like a novel. You see how my ex in this relationship over and over and over says, I'm getting better, I've never worked harder, all of this stuff. They keep going on and on about it. And I believe him. But you know what? He's not ever really, because a true crisis looks like this. It's such a dark place that you don't even know if you can live with yourself. You can't stand yourself. And you know that if you don't immediately change, then you can't continue on. And most of the people who say, I'm getting better, are never in that space. So it's interesting to me why we accept that, why we believe it when there's no intention, and then there's no crisis going on. The crisis is they want the conflict between you and them to go away, not the conflict they have with themselves. So watch out for that. If you don't see oh, thank you so much, Lynna. If you don't see somebody who's truly in a dark night of their own soul, it's not authentic. It's just a way to say, please get off my back. So that's why it's never, sorry about that for those who felt bumped. That's why it's never sincere, because it isn't sincere. And somebody just asked about a group coaching that Lisa and I are doing. Yes, Lisa and I are doing a webinar called Feeling Stuck. It is March 7th. I've been posting the how to sign up for it everywhere. And if you, I know for YouTube, I'll put it in the, yes, it's in the show notes for YouTube. And I think it's in it may or may not be in the show notes for Facebook, but it's a free webinar, March 7th at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, called Feeling Stuck. We're going to talk about the biggest thing that gets people stuck in recovery, why we don't get better. When here you are, you think, I can't stand being in this relationship. Something's really, really wrong. And if I could just get out, I'd get better. And then you get out and you think, why is it not better? I feel as bad as I felt while I was in it. Because there's some things that are inherently wrong. Your nervous system has been jacked up and is in a fight and flight mode. You have to unstick it because of trauma. You're also having problems with reorganizing your life, restructuring your life. This person has occupied a massive position in your life. You have to learn how to decenter them from your mind. You're now having all sorts of issues. It goes on and on and on. There's lots of issues. So we're going to be talking about what the top issue is for survivors. And then we're going to also introduce to you guys that we're starting a group coaching program, a live group coaching program that starts the end of March. There will be another one that starts up a few weeks later. So if you can't join the first one, you can join the second. And it's 12 weeks and we cover all these topics one by one. How to deal with the grief, how to deal with your rage, what to do with your guilt, how to handle the shame, all these different pieces that are very common to those of us who are trying to heal from narcissistic abuse. A question came in, can I talk about covert narcissists? My husband, after 10 years of marriage, cheated, and he still is. Holly, what's your specific question about it? I would love to know, what is it that you're struggling with? Covert narcissists are a fascinating group. My ex was also very covert in a lot that he did. Interestingly enough, he never once called me a bad name. The worst name he ever said to me at one point was, you're an overweight, middle-aged woman. Okay, yeah, you just described me. Yes, I'm an overweight, middle-aged woman. Got it. That's the worst thing he ever said to me. He even hardly ever raised his voice. He once charged me and kind of raised his fist back close to my face. He threw things. He broke several phones, so he would do property damage. But as far as like outright abuse of me, he stonewalled a lot. That's what he loved to do. He loved to sort of withdraw, withhold sex. He would just disappear. He would, all that crap. He would just like pull away from me, and punish me by not being around me. That's his biggest tactic to hurt me. And he gaslit the hell out of me. He was very good at gaslighting, very good at deception. And basically, a lot of what he said wasn't true. It was very hard to know what was real versus what's not real. He always had a ready story. I saw him lying to his friends for no reason. He would just lie for the sake of lying. In fact, I think he felt like the truth was a privilege that nobody really actually ever got the benefit of. He just kind of withheld himself from everybody. And yeah, that's kind of that's kind of an example of some covert narcissism. But a covert narcissist, the vulnerable narcissist, is a person who really puts himself in the victim position. And mine did it in a subtle way. Some of them like they beat their chest like life's unfair and they never get what they want and always goes wrong. Mine did it more mine actually was very successful looking. He was handsome. He looked very professional. He knew how to carry himself like socially. What he would do is he would then, whenever things would go wrong, he would see himself as the victim. He wouldn't see how he made it go wrong. He would just sort of like felt like it, like somehow things should work out just because he wanted them to work out. Even though he put no effort into it, he didn't stick it through. He didn't attend to all the details. He sort of dropped things, but it was never his fault. It was somebody else's fault. So there's a whole range. That's the thing about narcissism, is that it ranges from like very subtle signs, very mild signs, to very severe signs. So you could have somebody who like tells you every day all the things that go wrong in their life, and they're the biggest sort of saddest loser, sort of the saddest loser in the whole world, and they'll compete with you for that spot. So if you have a bad day, they have a worse day. Yes, exactly. Poor me. They're always like, life never goes well, and I don't know why it never goes well. They're the biggest loser in the world. But you can also have, like with my ex, people who just who are quietly resentful that life isn't better. I didn't know it until we were considering getting divorced in the middle of the relationship. We actually took a break for a month, and he was talking about money, and I got a life insurance inheritance that I talk about in the book from my late husband's death. So I had this payout on a life insurance claim, and my ex said to me, "Life's never been fair to me, so why is it fair that you have this life insurance payout?" And I'm thinking, well, my partner died, and we were paying this massive policy every month, every year for years to have this policy because we knew that I would need the support if he was to die. Now, granted, when we bought it, he was in his 40s, so I've been paying on it for years. And I was smart to do that. We were smart to do that. But that's not like, there was nothing fair or unfair. In fact, if you think about it, it was really actually for a very sad reason that I got a payout because of a loss that devastated my family and devastated my life. So here's my ex, resentful that I came into the money because I lost my partner of 32 years. And I got money out of it. And he's like, well, life's never been fair to me. It shouldn't be fair to you. So he felt like he was owed, a big chunk of this money, which really it's like, dude, that's a legacy for me and my kids. It's not, it's just, their logic doesn't make logic. But that's a great example of a covert narcissistic thinking. It's just this, poor me, I deserve, life should treat me better. I should get what I want when I want it. And when they don't get it, they feel like they're like losing out. Like, that's just really ridiculous. The topping that's done by neurodivergent people who have ADHD and autism can, as a way to connect and show that they're listening and care so much. So how do you distinguish between the two? Dustin, that's a great question, because Dustin, I don't know if you know it, but I'm autistic. And I do that. I give an example of myself. When somebody tells me something, I want to say, oh, that happened to me too, and then give my story. And I realize that when I'm doing it, they may experience it like I'm competing with them, when really I'm trying to show that I can relate to them. Yeah, I think the way to know the difference between a neurodivergent and a narcissist who's showing you up. So when narcissists do it, they're trying to show you up. It's like, well, you think that's bad? Well, then listen to this. Or like, how many times have those of us who've been living with a narcissist say that we're really sick today, and they're like, well, my back hurts. You feel like now they've negated your illness because they have a bad back today. Like, or yet when they're sick and it's even a cold, man, life stops. It's the worst thing that's ever happened. Um, yeah. So I think the way to tell the difference is, do you feel like that person gives you space to still be in a bad space? So for the narcissist who's showing you up, they've essentially shut the conversation down. They've one-upped you, and now they're done, and they want you to stop talking about it because they're worse than you. But when it's an autistic person and you come circle back to your issue, they're like, yeah, I can understand that would be really tough. I hated it when it happened to me. I have noticed though, Dustin, that I have to really watch it and not do it. So when I feel the temptation to share a story, I have to like say to myself, is this really the right time for that? I mean, I know that I'm trying to say that I relate, but maybe that's just going to be come off crass or not helpful. So I come back to, I usually like with, sometimes I say something, sometimes I don't. It depends. So I try to like interject a thought in and say, is this the right time to share that? Oh, Krista, thank you so much for that. Yeah, there is no validation with a narcissistic person. They don't come back and say, oh, they care. They just one up you. I do know all my sons are narcissists. All my sons are autistic. And I do know that sometimes for people who are a little more autistic, it can be hard to know how to empathically connect. So there'll be a miss, there will be a lack of validation. But I know if you stop them and said, hey, I need you to hear this. I know if I stop my sons and say, I need you to hear this, they're like, okay, I'm sorry, I get this. And then they'll hug me. So I feel still this emotional connection, but sometimes they don't realize that it comes off crass and it comes off like I feel missed. Yeah, I do think neurodivergents do get it. I do think that when we do it to each other, we kind of know that's what we do. I do know that when it's happening. Yeah, RWD says my ex-husband sounds like a typical envious narc. He was actually ruminating that he thinks about of what he thinks of my success. Oh, that Dr. Carter says that envy comes across in their anger. Oh, that's really fascinating. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I did realize that you're right, that it wasn't it what he was signaling that he thought a lot about it, and he was very resentful of the money that I came into from that life insurance payout. And although by the way, he was spending it heavily. He had no qualm spending it. I mean, whenever we went out, he'd always order the most expensive item in the restaurant. Seriously, I'm not kidding you. He'd order the largest ribeye bone-in steak that he could order, which I always thought was astonishing because I know that if it had been on his dime and I did that to him, he would be so furious that I did that. I knew I didn't ever dare. He would actually take me into the Rolex store and show me which Rolex he wanted. I looked at him and think, really? I'm never buying you a Rolex. That's just not happening. Okay, please elaborate. Yeah, what is the Dana Fay talking about? I'm going to go back and see if I can find it. Oh, thank you, Aspen, for buying it on Audible. Buying Love You More. I appreciate that. Dana, your question's a ways back. I'm struggling to find it. So I'm hoping you put a question in again. And Kim, thank you, or Kate, thank you so much for all your modding today. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, Four Agreements. I've heard of the Four Agreements. I haven't personally read it, but I've heard it's really wonderful. I need to put it on my list to read. What about narcissism and schizophrenia? Wait, Brett, I know you've asked that question more than once and I haven't answered it. I don't think there's any connection that I've seen in research at all. Not one, whatever, not any at all. I have worked at a psychiatric facility, a couple years worth. So I worked with schizophrenics, and schizophrenia occurs approximately in 1% of the population throughout the world. It's an even number, meaning every culture has it occurring about at the same rate. So it's a neurological condition, but I don't know of any correlation between narcissism and schizophrenia. Can you be both at the same time? Absolutely. But because you have schizophrenia, are you more likely to be narcissistic? Absolutely not. There's no connection that I'm aware of. And if you're narcissistic, are you more likely to be schizophrenic? Absolutely not. I know of no connection between them at all. None. None. No connection. I know of no connection between bipolar disorder. I know no connection between anxiety disorder, no connection between depression, none of those. Can they both be co-occurring with narcissism? Absolutely. But I have never heard of any direct connection. How do I stop sabotaging myself when it comes to making decisions for myself? Well, thank you for asking it again, Dana. I appreciate that. Can you give an example of how you're sabotaging yourself? Because I can't read into what you're doing, so it would be helpful if you could give a little details. Like, what do you do that gets in the way of you doing the right thing for yourself? Do covert narcissists get away in therapy often? I actually think narcissists get away in therapy a lot. I have had, in fact, one of the biggest personality group that I saw in treatment outside just the normal run-of-the-mill people were narcissists. For some reason, I tended to have a practice that had a few narcissists in it all the time. So I worked with them over a long period of time, some of them for years. And I also, some of them come in and just go, come in and leave and come in and go leave. And do they ever ask if they were a narcissist? No, they never asked if they were a narcissist. Did they ever ask if I was a narcissist? No, they never asked if I was a narcissist either. But what often happens when they're the more pathological, more difficult, then they wore the therapist out tremendously, and sometimes that meant then treatment got compromised. I saw the narcissist in my treatment, so he was in couples therapy. I know, don't recommend it, but I didn't know that back then. So he and I went in for couples therapy, and I saw how he twisted up the therapist and was manipulating her. I could see that he was doing that. And that, he did effectively shut the effectiveness of treatment down with his maneuverings. He was very, very good at it. I knew she was aware of some of it, but I knew she also wasn't aware of all of it. I don't think she was aware of how deceptive he was being. And I also don't realize it. I don't think she knew he was grooming her, that if they'd gone on long enough, he would have wanted to have individual sessions with her, and he was attempting to groom her so that he could approach her sexually, because he liked to do that to everybody. He was constantly grooming people for an inappropriate relationship. And he certainly was working on her. I could see it he was doing it in front of me, grooming her in front of me. He did that quite a bit, partly to hurt me, but also partly just because he could. And he got off kicks and giggles doing it. So did she realize that? Probably not. She probably just thought he was being nice. She probably didn't realize that there was something. She probably was ignoring the ickiness to it, so she didn't pick up on it. But it's common for them to sabotage treatment. Is super common. How can we be an empath with low self-esteem? Yeah, I think empath, like I was saying earlier today, I think empath really is a survival skill a lot of us have learned when we have survived very toxic relationships, that we have gotten into the position of showing up in a way to offset the risk of things going really wrong with that person. We offer ourselves to help soothe their emotional interior experience. So we almost get into mind reading a bit. We get really good at reading the language and body language and the cues and everything, every signal. We get really good at identifying those signals and then anticipating this person's emotional experience in order to keep things as safe as possible. So it becomes challenging for us to move ourselves out of that role to really focus on ourselves and take care of ourselves better. It was super, it's a lot of work. I think by recognizing you're doing it can help. It can help you a lot. Yeah, it's interesting. Gray Rock Cooking says nobody's an empath, but people can be empathic. I kind of agree with you. I think I see it as on a continuum. All of us have a level of intuition and the ability to be really good at reading people. And I think some of us get a lot of practice at getting super good at it. So if you come from a scary home or a emotionally troubled home or with emotionally immature parents, and you have been asked to function in a way to keep the family or that parent healthy or on their feet, you can get, like, even with an addiction, if you have a family that's got an addiction in it, you can get really good at anticipating what other people need. I also think adults can learn it, though. It's just like a muscle. Empathy is like a muscle. So you can learn to get more empathic if you're being forced to do it. The hard part about it is that it's not reciprocal. It's not fair. you should have the same amount of empathy being given back to you. You should experience validation and support and understanding for you as much as you're giving to somebody else. But a lot of us, I would say, that we are so good at doing it for other people that we lose ourselves in the process. And that's what you're really saying, Krista, is that you've learned it so well that you're not really showing up very well for yourself anymore. And boy, I'm right there with you. I do that really well. Krista, have you heard of echoism? Echoism is is extreme form of the opposite of narcissism. That's when somebody has been so overutilized for the sake of the narcissist that they cease to exist as a person. Their degree that they exist and show up is to benefit think of Echo in the myth with Narcissus. Echo ceased to even have a voice. Her only voice was to say what with the last few words Narcissus said. She basically emptied herself and became a reflection of him. And that's called Echoism off of her name. So Echoism from the story of Echo and Narcissus. And if you look up on it, you can find Craig Melkin, Malkin, Dr. Craig Melkin writes about it in his book, Narcissism Revisited. So I'd highly recommend it. Christina Shapiro has an academic book on echoism. I don't recommend that one. It's written at a graduate level. It's very difficult to read. It's based all on this theoretical understanding of it. So it's extremely difficult. But Dr. Melkin's material is very approachable. And Dr. Malcolm himself has said, I think, that he struggles with echoism as well. Yes, thank you. Dr. Malcolm, you spelled it correctly. Yep. Yeah, it is amazing how empathy taken to an extreme, it creates a loss of self. That's really what we're describing. It's a loss of self. And that's to a pathological level. And I think a lot of us, when we say we're empathic, yeah, exactly. That's how you spell it. I remember going into a therapist the same way, Krista. I went in and said, listen, I'm so aware of what people are feeling. I can't not be aware of myself. I can't walk into a room and just be myself. It was driving me nuts. And I was having the same kind of experience. It's a process to learning to stop doing that. You have to get brave enough to know that even if nobody likes you because you're you have to get brave enough to say it doesn't matter. I'm okay no matter what. And it also has to get to a point where you say everybody's feelings is their problem. It's not my problem. So they're not in a good space. Oh well, it's not my problem. I sometimes have to imagine myself in a bubble. Like I'm in my own space and what's happening around me is they're in their own space, and that's not I need to disconnect from that. So you can learn to develop kind of an emotional boundary. That's what we're really talking about, an emotional sense of self. Yeah. If you guys love this kind of topics, make sure you sign up for my newsletter. It's $5 a month, and I give you exercises, audio clips, more resources. I go in a lot of depth about it. You can find this stuff. You can find the different tiers of benefits that I offer, the link in my bio. So that's the first level is $5 a month. You get a subscription. It comes out every Monday. I'm having one come out on how not to be sick, how narcissistic relationships make us ill, how to take back your health. Another one coming up in the future is also how to deal with gaslighting, the ways in gaslighting shows up. And actually, I'm featuring Dr. Stern, who wrote The Gaslight Effect. She actually reads the list of, are you being gaslit? That's exclusive content that it will not be published anywhere but through my newsletter. So if you're looking for stuff that you just can't find elsewhere, please consider joining that. RWD wanted to know what would have made my ex happy. Actually, he described what would make my ex happy. He told me what would make him happy. This is what he wanted in a woman. Now, he really didn't want this. I think what he wanted was scarier, that I don't actually dare talk about because it would not fly on social media. But what he really wanted was, he said, was a woman sleeping at his feet, waiting on him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no needs of herself, but completely was there at his service for his needs all the time. That's what he wanted. I had no idea. He never told me that until months into the relationship. Because if he had told me that while we were dating, hell, I would have found the nearest exit. That's scary. I think a person he's basically, he's describing a slave. It's scary. I would not have volunteered for that. So when he said that, I was really upset, very angry actually. So, and I realized by the time he said it that there's things he was not telling me. that he wanted more than that. He wanted something that was even more frightening than that. And it was horrific. I married a sexual predator. That's who I married. I didn't realize it, but he was a true blue, outright predator. Dangerous. He's a very he's probably one of the most he's a siren. That's what I've decided. He's a true blue siren. He's one of the nicest, most appealing, charming people. He can make everybody like him as long as he's on, showing his best side. But when you get to know him and really get to hear a few of his thoughts, because he's never going to tell you all of his thoughts, but you can't meet a more scarier person, really, seriously. And he wouldn't be anybody I would ever want around a young woman at all. He's very dangerous to women in general, very dangerous. Women, he doesn't even see women as human. You're not human. You're cattle to him. So it's frightening. Dustin says, I think traditional counseling harms survivors because they promote communication of validating feelings and explaining that it's not our job to tell the people to whether their feelings are valid. So the narcissist pretends to be offended. And this is really intriguing. Tends to intentionally misinterprets what you said and then manipulate and controls and demands validation of their nonsense. That is a fascinating point. Yeah, it is. As a therapist who would see couples with one of them was more of a narcissistic in tendency, I did see that, where they would do this kind of circular argument and then act all offended if not everybody in the room validated what they just said. You're right. Therapists get put in the terrible position because when you do couples therapy, the client is the relationship. The client is not either partner. It's the relationship. So here you are staying in the position trying to save this relationship, and you've got somebody who's asking for really unreasonable things. But if you confront them, then you've harmed the relationship. So you're in this bind, this double bind really, where it's very difficult to save the relationship while also preserving the healthiness in the room. In fact, one of the creators, Matt Pfeiffer, plays a lot of Esther Perel. I think it's Esther Perel's work. It's a therapist. Maybe it's from a show. And one of the more recent was of a couple with a very narcissistic partner. And you can see it, the way that this guy binds her right up into his, pretty much makes her ineffective in the treatment, which is why I don't recommend I don't recommend couples therapy. I even think that you have to be careful with individual therapy. They have to see somebody who's trained to understand how to be confrontational in an appropriate way, to kind of talk to them about the stuff that they're doing that's not working, kind of call them out for their dysfunctional behavior. I got to hear Dr. Gregory Lester. Dr. Gregory Lester is one of the experts in this arena. He actually does counseling of personality disorders. He counsels narcissists, and he says if you and I were to watch him work, we would find it uncomfortable because he's very confrontational. You have to kind of cut through the bullshit with these individuals, which a lot of therapists aren't trained to do that. We're trained more in the Rogerian, Carl Rogers, which is be unconditional, accepting, and create safety. Well, that, you can't do that enough. There's no enough perfect enough for a narcissist. I'll never forget, I had a narcissistic client who came in and said she was describing a bad day. It was a woman. She was describing a bad day. And I said, sounds like you're very frustrated. She goes, no, I'm irritated. I'm thinking, frustrated and irritated. Now, to me, they're very similar. But to her, I missed it. I didn't use the right word. She wanted me to say she was irritated. And because I didn't perfectly mirror her, she was very upset with me. Yeah, it's exhausting. They're very exhausting to work with. I'm not surprised, Melissa, that marital therapy made it worse because they often weaponize what happens in the room. So Jody, you want to meet your narcissistic dad who you've never met, but you're scared. Okay, so here's a question I have for you. That's a really great example. Thank you for that. What is it you want to accomplish by meeting him? You have to set up a realistic goal that you can accomplish on your own, not something you're looking for from the relationship. So if you're looking for him to say, acknowledge that you mattered, or he's happy you're born, or he's glad that he got to meet you, you're probably going to be disappointed. If you go with the idea of saying, I want to say that I saw him with my own two eyes so that I could say at least I met the man, that's achievable. You can go and see him with your two eyes and walk away knowing I saw him. But it has to be something for you what you get out of it, not for what you get out of it from the relationship standpoint, because he's not going to connect with you in an emotional way or have you have a sense of being a father to you in any way. You're going to feel very disappointed if you walk in with any of those types of expectations. I thought that was super powerful. That came out, that recommendation, again, comes out of Dr. Lindsay Gibson's book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. She talks about this in the, I think it's chapter number 9 or 10. She talks about that, the differences between setting your goals versus setting relationship goals. You have to go into every interaction with a narcissist with your specific goals, not for what you hope happens in the relationship. So for example, if you go in to say your piece, like say something happens that's a disagreement and you want to get your piece off your chest, you can say, I want to say my part, and say it. But if you're looking for them to say, I understand, wow, that would be tough. I know why you're upset with me. You're not going to get that. That's a relational goal. That's not a relational goal. I mean, that is a relational goal and they can't meet it for you. Sorry, I'm reading a comment and talking at the same time. Not a good suggestion. So be very clear that you go in for what it is specifically you want, nothing you hope to get from the relationship, because it won't happen on a relational level. Do I suggest the book Attached? Oh, the book, like, is who wrote the book Attached? Yeah. No, they don't ever understand, Melissa. In fact, they know that we want closure. They really understand that. In fact, they'll tell you that if they want, in fact, one of the popular ways to bait you is when the relationship's falling apart, they'll come back and say, I know that you really want to understand what happened. Let's meet and we can talk about it. That is the biggest, that's a bear trap. Please watch out for that. Mine used it on me. I've heard you guys describe it. That's been used on you many, 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 many times. No, what will happen is you'll go and meet with them and they'll ask you for one more thing they want from you. And there's no discussion of what they did to you or why they did to you or how they understand it harmed you. You're not going to get anything at all from that. That's just, they know, they dangle that like a carrot so that you'll engage. And then once they get you into the room, then they'll go into what they want, one more thing. Like, I want you to do this for me, or you need to give this to me, or I want this out of the relationship with the kids, or whatever. Mine was asking for more money. That's what he wanted. So please be careful of that bait. There is no insight. That would mean accountability and responsibility, and they don't take accountability and responsibility. So Raina's talking about, I would focus more on what you can change, what they can change, and how you'd feel versus seeing a diagnosis. I often think a diagnosis is not always beneficial. I'm not for, maybe I think a lot of us want a diagnosis of our partner or family member or a loved one because we really want someone to say, yes, this person's ill. But what difference does it make? Really, what you're saying to yourself is, this is really bad and I don't want to put up with it anymore. That's enough. You have it enough in the sense of you deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve to feel like you exist, that your emotions are important. You deserve to have somebody celebrate you. And if you're in a relationship where you feel invisible or used or worse, degraded and humiliated, that's enough to leave. We don't need to have that person have a label to say we have a right to get out of the relationship. So I think a lot of us really are just looking for validation that what we're going through is awful and this person's been abusive. But I don't think it really matters. My ex, well, first of all, I'm licensed to diagnose, but I can't diagnose a loved one. I mean, that's not ethical. But we used to joke that he was narcissistic. He thought it was funny. And me even knowing the truth that he is, I mean, I know he meets the criteria, although nobody probably ever has given him the diagnosis, although he saw a therapist. But I have a feeling it probably haven't diagnosed him that. But it doesn't matter. To me, what matters is what happened in that relationship, and that's the truth. The truth is that he harmed me. The truth was I wasn't safe. Is blocking them the only way to get them out of your life? That will be the last question I take today. Oh, Mariel, it's all recorded. So yeah, I'd love that you would listen and let me know what you think. I always appreciate seeing you show up today. So thank you for being here. By the way, while you reminded me, Mariel, I won't be live now for the next 2 weeks. So for next week, I'll be in Mexico getting ready for the Rising Strong retreat. I'm so excited. We have 17 women going. And then the week after that, I'll be wrapping up and kind of winding stuff up from the retreat and coming home. So I won't be here for the next 2 weeks, but then I'll be back on March 5th. I will be live again. We'll be talking about gaslighting in that one. So yeah, and there is going to be another retreat for both men and women. I don't have a website page up about it yet, but put on your calendar September 3rd through the 6th for men. It's called Unleash Your Potential. And no, I take that back. September 19th through the 22nd for men. September 19th through the 22nd for men. For 20 men, it's called Unleash Your Potential. And then for women, it's October 3rd through the 6th. It's called Strong and Unstoppable and includes an acquiring equine therapy piece. We're partnering with an equestrian center, and both of those are in Orlando, Florida. So October and September is in Orlando, Florida. Please put it on your calendar. I'd love to have you guys join me. It would be amazing to have you be there. But yes, next week I'm going to be in Mexico running the retreat. Thank you, Kate. There's the dates. Men is September 19th through the 22nd. Women is October 3rd through the 6th. Both is in Orlando. Both is the same kind of setup. You'll be in an exclusive home with a pool. You'll be with chef service. It's all inclusive. It's going to be an amazing experience. They each have a little bit different focus. Men will be helping you understand your vulnerabilities, how to strengthen your vulnerabilities so that you are not vulnerable in the future, how to really fully emotionally unleash your potential. For women, it's going to be talking about how to become more of a confident person in yourself and in the world. And we're going to be using an equestrian center as an equine therapy as a key piece of your experience. So the question of no contact, is no contact the only way to go or the most beneficial way? I think that really it often has to be, because narcissistic people just know how to keep baiting us. I don't think you have to. I think you can go limited contact sometimes, but it ends up being often a way for us to reduce our exposure, is just to get a break from them, because they like to send messages. They'll send messages through their profile picture. They'll send messages of what they're posting on social media. You just feel them like stalking you. Unfortunately, what a lot of narcissistic people do is they see people in relationships like you're the best way I always compare it to is like they're a car collector. And now they've collected you, and you sit in the back lot with your tarp over top of you in their mind. And then whenever they want to visit you, they go pull the tarp off and dust you off, and they want to like see how you're doing, especially when they feel like they're low on supply. They may then come back out and just check on how you're doing. It's not wise for us to be vulnerable like that. And sometimes it's best to go no contact, just to block and cut, so that you feel you're free. Now, granted, they can always make a new anonymous account and stalk you again, but so I've had to make the mental decision I'm not going to pay attention to that. But it does help me to kind of like take myself off the shelf away from this person. So for me, it gives me sort of peace of mind. It does. So I don't think you have to do it, but I do think it's beneficial. I like that, Mariel. A doggy chew toy. That's exactly right. You just answered my questions. Flying monkeys, baiting. Yeah, they do that. They like to utilize people around them to sort of get you back, dog whistle you, do those type of things. Just because they like to like stir you up. They want to see you react. It gives them a charge. This is an interesting thing. I saw this was a neuroscience report that came out that for them to get you upset and have a negative reaction is just as rewarding as a positive reaction. So they get a like charge out of you being upset. So I just don't want them to have that benefit. I don't want to give them a charge of anything. So, all right, you guys, it's been amazing hanging out with you today. Thank you so much for being here either on Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok. This has been recorded on Facebook as well as on YouTube. So if you want to rewatch it, it's available there. No, unfortunately, kind to you, I don't do one-on-ones these days because I've retired, but I do have a group. I do office hours within my group. So if you'd like more contact with me, please consider becoming a club member of my group. Again, you can find all those tiers: subscription, community member, club member, or VIP, which there I do offer one-on-ones at the VIP level. I'd be happy to do that there. So check out my tiers. It's a link in my bio. You guys are amazing. I always love all the questions. So good. Very, very good. Take care. I'll see you back in 3 weeks from now. And we'll talk more. Bye-bye, you guys.